Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
We are blessed with the wonderful Beverley, pronouns she, her, who is a researcher, creative and business owner. I have been just absolutely loving my own journey of meeting and working with Beverley. Beverley has many, many skills and is currently, as well as a business owner, etc., a full-time PhD researcher based within the School of English at the University of Sheffield. She is doing a creative writing doctorate that delves into identity, particularly Black, British, Caribbean and African descendants. Her research also focuses on identity through the prism of trauma, double consciousness, homosexuality, family secrets, slavery, the supernatural, the mystical and Afro-futurism. She has been published in several magazines, including Bad Form and the Dreamcatchers magazine. Her poetry, yes, poetry too, was exhibited in the Being Human National Festival, November 2021. His House to Our Home, 3D virtual exhibition by Public Engagement Sheffield, art.spaces and KUNSTMATRIX. She has guest lectured on Octavia Butler, spoken to an international audience for the Daring to Dare developmental programme, and was a speaker at the University of Sheffield English Colloquium 2022. She is currently the CEO of BDT Creatives, a grant writing and editing company. Like, just mic drop already, you know, like, so me and Beverley, we speak quite often, and every chat is like, we start out like, we'll just have a quick chat and then we just dive. Like, speaking with Beverley is the most delicious. It's funny because Beverley just gave Amma the most wonderful compliment about Amma's voice being like coffee with cream. And I feel like our conversations, you know, they're just so delicious and so delightful. And I think, listeners, you are in for a treat. Welcome, Beverley.
It's so great to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this. Honestly, listeners, I'm getting my geek on. Plus, Beverley's energy is so infectious. Cannot deal. I'm so fizzy inside. It's ridiculous.
You two stop. I beg you.
I just have one more to add. Just listener, like, the way Beverley is dressed is also it's activism, it's positivity. Beverley is rocking a star in her hair. It's just like, you know, there's all of the vibes, earrings. Yes. Like, yes, just all of the good things, all of the good energies.
Beverley, it's clear you're doing so many wonderful things. And we did mention that one of those things is a PhD. Can you tell us a bit more about it? Like, why did you decide to do a PhD? What is it about?
Over 2 years ago, I wanted to do something different. I'd been in education for a very long time and I decided to leave because I didn't feel that our education system was actually doing much education. Because to me, it was always education was always about developing young people's minds to be questioning and to be challenging. And actually, education stopped doing that. It just wanted people to pass exams. And I thought, no, I'm not staying in this mess. I'm not staying in this mess.
Yes.
Going children that were struggling. I wanted to do something different. And I started to think about myself, the things that I began to notice about us as Black people, the lack of mental health support, the lack of really understanding our stories, the hostile environment created for the Windrush generation and their descendants. And I started feeling annoyed. And I thought, you know what? Just rather than being annoyed, do something about it. And I decided to write our stories. And I thought that's where I'm going to start. And why am I writing our stories? Because first of all, we were never given reparations.
Yes.
People, we need reparations.
Right.
When you start to unpick the story of the Black person in the Caribbean, in America, in Africa, although they didn't have slavery on that level, but they had colonialism, what you get is people always having to fight to live. Because the wealth has constantly been taken out of our community. So when people say to me, well, Black people aren't as rich as white people or Asian people or Chinese people, duh, of course not. If you think about it, slavery only finished 1862. 1862. It's not a far away thing.
And even countries, regaining their independence, a lot of that happened in the 50s and, and after. And so it's like one generation. It's so close. There's barely any time that's passed. So, the reverberations of it are still being felt so much. Like there's so much catch up happening.
Yeah.
We're having
And
to catch up.
Commonwealth. What is Commonwealth? What it means is Britain takes from Black countries and they get the wealth.
Yeah.
There's still an element of control and power.
Yeah. And I was reading stories about people that came out of slavery before slavery finished. But imagine this. You work, you do your little bit on the side because they were allowed to do their little bit on the side, so they raised money. But then the money they raised, then they had to give it to the white slave owners so that they could have freedom. So again, they would be starting, their lives with nothing.
The work that you're doing in your PhD, you do really look at kind of how these traumas are also inherited and how there's like memory within the body and how that affects our minds. And it would be, I mean, I think the work that you're doing is so important and so needed, but also there's not that much, or there could be. We need more information, and it would be wonderful to hear more about the work that you're doing and what your findings have been around that.
So I started with, as I said, with this rage. I mean, really, this rage, because all of these things were accumulating. And I started doing this doctorate. And at first, I started with my family stories. And I started doing further research. But somehow it wasn't landing. I mean, my supervisors loved my work, but somehow it wasn't landing for me. And it wasn't landing because I began to see that actually we're more than this trauma. And we're more than colonialism. And we're more than what people say that we are. And I started, and my supervisors, and honestly, I would tell any Black person, if you've got an interest, you are interested in something and you want to research it more, do a doctorate, because it's been the best thing that I've
Amazing.
ever done. Because it gave me the time to think about myself, to really think about my people, and then to step outside of the rage and actually begin to heal within, but also
Mm,
looking at the white majority culture, and rather than going, yeah, you really screwed us over, it's like, no, that's a
mm,
retrograde step. And all the time we're like trying to address them, when actually we should be trying to address us. Where are we now, and where do we want to be
Yes.
in the future? And I think that's why I started to move towards thinking more speculative, more mystical, more Afro-futuristic, more opening my mind more. Because I started with writers like um, Andrea Levy, and it's all about the colonialism and look at us poor and all of that. And it's kind of, no, we are actually more than that, Andrea. And I know she had her struggles, because there's a BBC podcast about it where she says that she didn't even recognize herself as Black. She thought she was white for ages. Um, and but that struggle is in her writing, and it's actually on finding people like Octavia Butler that I went, wow, you mean we can write
Yes.
like this? We can think like
Yes.
this?
I've just finished reading Octavia Butler's Kindred, and oh my goodness. I mean, yeah, I can't wait to read more, but the power of going profoundly deep and making things very, very obvious. And yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
like that period of reading her book. It's like I couldn't sleep. It was in my dreams. It was just so such a kind of visceral experience, the way she writes.
Mm. And dreams. I did a story actually called Dreams and Vision, where I was moving from where we are now back to history, flip-flopping, and that was because of Octavia Butler. It's kind of, all right, maybe we can find ways of readdressing our past, but in a more dynamic way, in a stronger way.
mm. And I guess with more, like you're saying, with this focus on forward movement and, how possible we are, and not kind of referencing or not moving from colonialism as the pinpoint, but actually moving from, or slavery, but actually moving, from before that, like actually who were we before these these
Mm.
wrenching, awful invasions. Like, who were we before that? Because that's who we are in our true nature. That's where we need to actually start from, because often discourse starts from those points in history,
Mm.
but actually there was a whole existence before that. There was a whole way of living. We had our um our characteristics, our ways of living, our practices, our sense of self, and actually moving from that point and then looking at where do we want to be, I think really changes our
Mm.
ideas and our beliefs around how possible we are, and then how we share space with others, what angle we start from, and then how that interaction then impacts the
Yes, that's
relationships we
right.
have with other
And that's
people.
why Ryan Coogler's Black Panther was so massive, because people went, wow, this is what we would have been like if we didn't have slavery and colonialism and all that imperialistic stuff. Oh my goodness. But also, it got us to reimagine, and it got other people to think, oh, wait a minute. What we thought about Black people isn't really what. And then you start seeing, actually, it's not a new thing. Other Black people have been talking about this thing and saying
Yeah,
about this thing.
totally.
But the mainstream, they're happy to keep pushing out people like, and I'm not cursing Andrea Levy, by the way, or anybody who writes of that past, because it's also needed. But why are people like Tay Thompson not getting, yeah, he's got some recognition, but why isn't he getting the same kind of recognition of Andrea Levy? And so doing the doctorate has freed my mind. It's freed my mind to think, all right, who's telling me this information and why are they giving me that information? Why are films about slavery? Well, actually, we're more than slavery. We were
Yeah.
doing other things. We were painting, we were writing.
And I
Yeah.
kind of feel that somehow language is really connected with this. And this is where, like, studies like doing a PhD and understanding where our language and our thinking have essentially been colonized, and how to kind of unlearn and rebuild with language that is empowering, and with thoughts that are empowering, and with possibility that is actually true and is not about oppression and other people kind of control and power. So we would love to know, kind of, for the future of the work that you're doing, because, and you're right, this work, there are many wonderful writers and many ways to access that are kind of not they're sort of hidden from the mainstream. You're absolutely right. But we would love to know about your work, and like how, if you have ideas about how to kind of disseminate it, if there might be workshops coming, if there may be retreats, like we'd love to know how we can access. And I think one of the things you said that was really powerful was doing PhDs, because I feel like even that, that possibility, like in my family line, my mum was the first person to go to university, and so there's this sort of like this thing around belief of possibility and studying even. But yeah, like, what can people do next? How can they access this work, and what are your plans moving forwards with this work?
I'm definitely going to get my collection of short stories and the critical piece, because the critical piece of my work is my reflection. It's like the way we've been talking today, I'm reflecting on all that, but obviously using research to cement my ideas so I don't sound like a crazy person like I have done today.
You have been so eloquent and inspiring.
I'm going to be published, and my supervisors are supporting me with that. And I tell you something. If people can do a doctorate, it would be so freeing. And if you're able to get the right support in the universities, because universities now, they are changing and they're saying, look, we do need to do more for Black people. And I've recently been put on a board which covers several universities. And actually, when I did the interview, they said, tell us what you think people actually need. So one of the things, and it's called the YSEED board, YCEDE. And they said, well, in the interview, what do you think people really need? And I said, right, I'm not putting all Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups together now. I'm going to separate. And I started with Black people. And I said, actually, it would be good if universities gave Black people scholarship support, so that they're not having to think for 4 years
Yeah.
about money. And I thought, "Oh, they're going to think this woman's really cheeky," but I got on the board because if imagine, money has already been taken out of our communities so many times. Even when our parents came to this country, they didn't if a house costs somebody 5,000, That's because back in the day, houses were cheap, £5,000. They'd sell it to a black person for 10,000. So already your inheritance is now 5,000 less than somebody else's. And actually, the education system, they made money from the backs of black people. These universities were set up based on that money. So therefore, I think it's only beholden, and I'm going to keep pushing this point, on universities to give any black person who wants to do a doctorate a scholarship. So for 4 years, they do not have to think about money. So that they can think, so that they can heal, so that they can be inspired. And I am going to be published, and I might enter the BBC Short Book Prize.
Yes! Oh my God, I can't wait to read your book.
And I'm going to do a festival. Yes! The festival.
Yes, I love this. And I feel like if I can kind of draw all of this under one umbrella, let's say, I feel like what we've spoken a lot about, or what we're ultimately talking about moving towards, is reimagining our futures. And I feel that we talked about this off the podcast, but I feel that In the Black Fantastic really spoke to that, the exhibition at the South Bank Centre Hayward Gallery. And also I know that there was an exhibition at the Barbican all on Afro-futurism this summer as well. I don't know if it's still there. Please feel free to go and have a look. I didn't make it there yet, so I hope it's still there. And it feels that Afrofuturism and the ideas around it and this reimagining of futures is starting to move more into the mainstream awareness. Not fully, but it definitely was more underground. It was definitely more niche. And we did mention that, but I feel ultimately there is a lot of power in that reimagining of futures. And it's not what some people might think, which is this kind of getting away from reality and being really woo-woo, but it's actually going, what could this be? And there's no limitations on what this could be and what we can be. So we're so here for it, Beverley, and we're really excited to follow you and support all of your reimagining of your future, our futures, and it's something we need.
It's about us living without limitations. Living without being told, no, you're this. You fit into this box.
Yeah.
It goes back to Ella's rainbow butterfly. So the caterpillar eats and eats. It fattens itself, and then it springs forth a different shape from where it started. And that's us as Black people moving into the 21st century. That's what we must be now.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Ella Mesma.
I am Amma Rouge. And we are PowerUp Podcast.